The last thing I remember was the gurgling. That wet, hungry sound. Then the lights went out, and something grabbed my ankle. I've worked night shift for over 12 years. I've seen weird things, but nothing like this. Name's Eric. I'm a building engineer. I handle overnight maintenance at a 12-story corporate office downtown. Most folks have no clue we even work nights in buildings like that. They just assume everything's magically fixed by morning. But it's me, or someone like me, walking those empty halls while the city sleeps. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's the kind of job that suits quiet people. Or maybe it turns you quiet. I'm not sure anymore. I keep to myself. Do my rounds. Check the HVAC systems. Tighten whatever's loose. Some nights I sit in the control room with a sandwich and a book, just waiting for the next ticket to come through. Usually it's simple stuff. A flickering light on the third floor. An odd noise in the elevator shaft. Every now and then, someone leaves a coffee pot plugged in. Nothing glamorous. Just things that need doing. That night, I was catching up on some old reports. The place was dead silent. I remember that clearly because I had this small desk fan that buzzed just enough to fill the silence. And even as it stopped, I didn't notice at first. It just slowly faded, like background noise dropping away, until all I could hear was a hum of the overhead lights. That's when I glanced at the panel and saw the boiler room sensors blinking. Boiler room 2. Temperature spike. Flow irregularity. Pressure anomaly. It looked messy, but these panels act up sometimes. Usually just dust on a sensor or a clogged drain pipe throwing things off. I figured I'd head down and flush the system, maybe tighten a few valves. I've done it 100 times. Nothing serious. Nothing strange. Just another part of the job. Still, I remember pausing before I stood up, not out of fear. Just something in me wanted to finish the report first, even though I could have easily saved it and gone back later. I guess I didn't want to break the rhythm. Or maybe I just didn't want to deal with it. Whatever the reason, I sat there for another 10 minutes typing nonsense, pretending I was being productive while that little red light kept blinking. Eventually, I got up, grabbed my flashlight, and headed for the sub-basement. The elevator doesn't go that low, so you have to take the service stairs past the storage level and down this narrow concrete passage. It's colder down there. Always has been. Doesn't matter the season. And the lighting? Dim. Faded. A soft hum. Like the fluorescents are barely hanging on. I remember thinking I should have brought a jacket. Funny what you remember. I passed the old generator room, stepped over a cable that's always been loose, and opened the metal door to the boiler level. The air changed immediately. Heavier, damp, like something hadn't been ventilated properly for weeks. My first thought was mold, or a leak. I had my flashlight up, scanning the pipes, checking for condensation or dripping water. But everything looked dry. Still, the temperature was all wrong. It was warm, but not from the boilers. It felt like body heat, if that makes sense. Like someone had just been there. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anything. But I stopped walking. Something made me stop. And I didn't move again for a long minute. The building wasn't the kind that made people stop and look. No fancy plaque out front. No stories in local papers. Just a 12-story rectangle of gray concrete and faded windows. You wouldn't know it had a past unless someone told you. And even then, it'd sound like trivia more than history. Back in the 50s, it was a textile warehouse. Cheap labor, long hours, bad lighting. Then sometime around 2003, someone with too much money decided to get the whole thing and turn it into modern office space. They added new wiring, put in elevators, laid down bright tiles, slapped on some glass panels. But they didn't touch the bones. The bones stayed the same. You can always tell when a place is wearing a costume. You look past the new paint, and there's the old brick underneath. The kind that wasn't meant to be seen. Just meant to hold things up and keep things in. Some parts of the building still smell like oil and rope. I mean that literally. Rope There's a kind of damp, frayed scent that never left the walls. The boiler room was deep, farther down than most people even realize. It wasn't in the basement. It was below the basement. You had to pass through 2 steel-fired doors, neither of which closed right anymore, and take a metal staircase that echoed louder than it should. That room, it had its own atmosphere. Like it didn't care what the rest of the building was doing. The ceilings were low enough that I had to duck in some places, and the pipes overhead were fat and rusted, some dripping just enough to stain the concrete below. The lights never worked properly. You'd flip the switch and get this sickly yellow flicker that made you feel like you were seeing things, even when you weren't. Other guys talked about it sometimes, usually in the break room. They'd swap stories, half laughing, half serious. Stuff like, watch out for the rats down there, big enough to drag your lunchbox away. Or, ever hear that clanging noise in the far corner? Like someone's hitting the pipes with a wrench. Most of it was nonsense. At least, I always thought so. No one ever saw anything. No one ever got hurt. And if you complained too much, they'd just assign you somewhere worse. Like the downtown data center. 2 full floors of buzzing servers and no coffee machine. So I never said anything. I never asked questions either. Just did my rounds, checked the gauges, marked the clipboard, and got out. That was the routine. In and out. Keep moving. Don't stare at the shadows too long. And never, never let yourself wonder why the air down there always felt used. Like someone else had already breathed it all in before you got there. It started with the drain. Just a floor drain in the boiler room. Nothing special. I'd seen plenty like it. You know the type. Covered in rust, chipped around the edges. Always a little damp no matter what. That night, I noticed the water wasn't going down. Just sitting there, spreading a little every time I moved. I crouched down, gave it a good look, and sure enough, the thing was clogged. Typical. Probably years of gunk built up inside. I grabbed the snake from the wall, shoved it down the pipe, started turning. You can usually feel the resistance, grease, old rags, sludge. But this was different. It caught hard on something, and when I yanked it back, the thing came up thick with this black goo. I mean thick, like paste. I got one whiff of it and turned my head. Smelled like something that had been left in a bag for a week under the sun, then mixed with sewage and mold. My eyes watered. I stood up, wiped my hand on my coveralls, and went back upstairs to get gloves. Now here's where things got weird. I wasn't gone long, 2 minutes, tops. Didn't even stop for coffee. Came straight back down the stairs. When I walked in, the snake was still lying there, right where I left it. But the drain, the sludge, gone. Every bit of it. Nothing on the floor, nothing on the tiles, not even a smear. Just that standing water again, calm as ever, like someone hit reset while I was gone. At first, I thought maybe it slipped back down. Maybe the pressure changed and sucked it through, but that didn't track. The water wasn't draining. Still sitting there, clear as glass, not moving an inch. I stood over it, waiting, thinking maybe it'd start bubbling up again. Nothing. Just silence. Then I heard it. It wasn't loud, not at first. It was a kind of noise that sneaks in slowly, like it's been there the whole time, but you're just now noticing. A slow, wet gurgling somewhere beneath the concrete. Not pipes. I know what pipes sound like. This was slower, deeper. It had rhythm. Pause between each sound, like breathing. Not fast or panicked. Just steady. In, out, in, out. As if something down there was taking its time. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Just stared at that drain, waiting for something, anything, to explain what I was hearing. No rush of water. No pressure shifts. Just that slow, living sound coming from under the floor, like the building was exhaling through its teeth. Part of me wanted to chalk it up to old infrastructure. Maybe some kind of backflow or gas buildup. Maybe I'd stepped on a pipe the wrong way, dislodged a seal, something like that. But that idea faded the longer I stood there listening, because the sound kept going. And the longer it went on, the more it started to feel deliberate. Still, I did what I was paid to do. I logged the issue on my clipboard, wrote drain blockage, check again tomorrow, and left the room. I didn't say anything to the day shift guys. Didn't see the point. Besides, what would I even say? Hey! The sludge vanished, and the floor is breathing. Your move. No. I figured I'd come back the next night, give it another look, see if maybe I'd just imagined it. Long nights can mess with you like that. You start hearing patterns in silence, reading signs in puddles. But deep down, I knew something had changed. That drain wasn't just clogged. It was aware. I didn't like the thinking that. Still don't. But sometimes, when you're all alone in a place that forgot how to be warm, thoughts like that don't wait for permission. They just show up. I went back down with the heavy gear. No more handheld tools. I wanted to clear that line for good. So I rolled out the motorized auger, the kind we usually reserve for tree roots and serious blockages. It's loud, bulky, and overkill for a floor drain, but at that point, I just wanted answers. Or at least control. I fed the cable in slow, kept my hand on the trigger, waited to feel that familiar bump or grind. 20 feet. Nothing. 30. Still smooth. By 40, I was starting to think maybe the blockage had moved on its own again. Then, right around 50 feet, it caught. Not like a jam. Not like the usual soft resistance. This was firm. And then it tugged. I'm not talking gravity or suction. I mean it pulled. Something on the other end gave a hard yank, like it was trying to take the auger from me. I hit the reverse switch fast. The motor whined, stuttered, nearly stalled. I kept my grip tight, braced my boots, and the machine finally jerked free. When the cable came back up, it wasn't clean. It was smeared in that same thick black sludge, but now it looked like it had clung to the cable. Followed it up, strings of it clung between loops, dripping. The smell hit me again, and it was worse this time. Like the rot had aged. I backed up and nearly slipped. That's when I noticed the marks. Scratches along the concrete, running from the edge of the drain toward the far wall. Long ones. Deep. Fresh. You could still see the powdered dust at the edges. The kind that doesn't settle unless the gouges are new. And they weren't shaped like a tool mark or wheel tread. No pattern. Just wild, frantic lines, like something had been dragged. Or something had crawled. The room shifted then. Not visibly, but the feeling in it changed. The temperature dipped, enough to see my breath. The air didn't just cool, it thickened. It clung to the skin. Damp, but not like water. It had that same metallic sting you get when you cut yourself. I tried not to breathe through my nose. The lights flickered once. Then again, one of them buzzed overhead. I stared at it for too long, hoping it would just hum itself out and go dark. It didn't. It stayed on, but weaker, like it was being fed through water. I told myself I was tired. I hadn't slept right in a few nights, and my shift was nearly over. Maybe the cold was just the building's ancient HVAC system giving out. Maybe the scratches were from equipment I hadn't seen used. I even wondered if someone was playing a prank. Some bored office kid with too much time and access to the lower floors. But then the ground moved. Not a shake. Not a rattle. No pipes thudding in the walls. It was more rhythmic. A single, steady thump. Just enough to make the floor lift ever so slightly beneath my boots. Then settle again. Like it was breathing. Like something underneath was flexing. A second passed. Then another pulse. It wasn't the walls. It wasn't from above or outside. It came from under the drain. Like something deep down had shifted, exhaled, and then pressed a little closer to the surface. I stood perfectly still. I didn't want to make noise. Not because I thought it would attract attention. More because I wasn't sure if it could already hear me. Or feel me. I backed away. Not quickly. Just enough to reach the wall and rest my hand against it. It felt warm. Not like sunlight or steam. More like skin after fever. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was just a plumbing issue. Whatever was in that pipe, whatever moved 50 feet down and pulled back on industrial cable, it wasn't something I had tools for. It wasn't something I could tighten, replace, or reroute. It was alive, and it wasn't finished yet. I went back down with a heavy gear, the industrial-grade auger we usually save for tree roots and serious blockages. I fed the cable in slow, hand on the trigger, waiting to feel the usual grind. 20 feet, 30, nothing. Then, at 50 feet, it caught, and then it pulled. Not a clog, a yank, like something down there grabbed the line and tried to take it. I hit reverse fast. The motor groaned, fought back. Eventually it gave, but when the cable came up, it was coated in that same thick black sludge. Worse this time. Stringy, clinging, and the smell like old blood and rotting meat. I stepped back and saw them. Fresh scratch marks on the concrete, long and deep, trailing from the drain. Not from wheels, not from tools. They looked frantic. The air shifted. Temperature dropped. I could see my breath. The lights dimmed, buzzed low. The whole room felt damp, like breathing through a wet rag. Everything metallic, sharp, wrong. I told myself I was overtired, maybe imagining things. But then the floor moved. Not a tremor, a pulse. Slow, deep. The concrete lifted beneath my boots, just slightly, like something underneath was pressing upward. Then again, another pulse. It wasn't the building settling. It wasn't pipes. It was under the floor, alive, and getting closer. I couldn't let it go. The drain, the pulsing, the scratch marks. It stayed with me long after I clocked out, so I started looking. Went back during the day, when everything felt less charged. Dug through old records, filing cabinets in the supervisor's office no one had opened in years. Dust thick enough to choke. Turns out the boiler room wasn't always a boiler room. Back in the early 60s, it was part of something called the flood suppression system. Some citywide infrastructure project that got quietly shut down in '74. No fanfare. No official reason. Just marked decommissioned and forgotten. I found blueprints. Real old ones. The kind drawn by hand on bro paper. That's a basement? It was once a water-holding tank. Massive. Reinforced. And it wasn't just used for overflow. It connected to other systems. Tunnels. Maintenance shafts. Some of them not even listed on the newer layouts. That's when I started noticing the annotations. Little things scribbled in the margins. Unidentified organic matter in line 4A. Another read, biosample unrecoverable corrosive? And one that really stuck. Request to seal maintenance tunnels denied. Higher up override. No explanation. No names. Then came the personnel logs. Shift schedules. Most were routine. But every so often, a name would appear and never show up again. No termination. No transfer. Just gone. I cross-referenced the badge numbers. They all had one thing in common. Last clock in during a night shift. All assigned to the lower levels. No police reports. No investigations. Just missing. And each case buried in a different department's archive, like someone went out of their way to keep it scattered. Hard to follow unless you were looking too closely. And by then, I was in deep. I started remembering what some of the older guys had said. The ones who transferred or quit after only a few months. The way they'd brush off questions. Change the subject. One even told me flat out, don't go past the second fire door if you can help it. I should have listened. There was a reason no one liked working down there. I just thought they were being superstitious. I thought I was being practical. But maybe I confused stubbornness for logic. And now I was the one digging through old ghosts, realizing too late that the thing in that drain wasn't a one-time problem. It had been part of this building longer than any of us. Long enough to be forgotten. But not gone. I went back one last time. Took a flashlight, some tools, and set my phone to record everything. I told myself it was just to get answers, to prove whatever was happening down there was real, and maybe put an end to it. But as soon as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. Not a gentle click, but a solid, final thud that made my heart jump. Then the walls started to weep. Water, thick and black, like oil mixed with something else, started seeping from every crack. It coated the floor, pooling around the drain. And that sludge, this time it moved. I swear it moved on its own, like it had a will. It spread, rippling like liquid but solid at the same time. Then it reached. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like it was trying to grab me. I ran, but I slipped on the slick floor. Before I could catch myself, something wrapped around my ankle. Cold, wet, heavy. It dragged me down, pulling me toward the drain like I was nothing more than a weight to be swallowed. I fought. I don't remember exactly how. One moment I was going under. The next I was coughing on the loading dock outside. Soaked to the bone and completely alone. The whole thing felt like it lasted forever and no time at all. But whatever tried to pull me in wasn't just sludge or water. It was something else, something that belonged to that place, that old forgotten system. And when I got out, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I quit the next morning. Didn't bother picking up my last paycheck. Didn't call anyone, didn't say goodbye. Just walked away. The whole thing felt like a weight I couldn't carry any longer. The building's still standing, though. Lights flicker on every night, like nothing ever happened. But the boiler room? They finally sealed it shut last week. Locked up tight, like whatever was inside needed to be left alone for good. Since then, I haven't been able to shake the memories. I keep having these dreams. Thick, dark water swirling, grates creaking open, and the feeling that something's watching from below. It's like the sludge isn't just in the pipes anymore. It's inside my head. And sometimes when I'm in the shower, I swear I can hear it. That slow, wet breathing coming from the drain, like it's still alive, waiting. If your building has an old boiler room, if you find yourself staring at a clogged drain, do yourself a favor. Leave it alone. Don't open it. Don't even think about it. Because some things are better left buried. There was no sound, no vibration, no warning. Just a full-size diesel train rolling toward us, and then straight through us. I saw their faces in the windows, pale, expressionless, watching. Hank says it happens sometimes. He says they don't always pass through. I've been a train engineer for over 15 years, long enough to forget the noise of the city, to find comfort in the silence between towns. The tracks became part of my life. Steel lines cutting through open country, carrying me through time more than distance. There's a rhythm to it. The hum of the engine, the occasional creak, the whisper of wind slipping past cars. It's quiet work, solitary. You learn to enjoy your own company. Most routes are familiar now. I could run them in my sleep, and some nights I probably did. Same towns, same signals, same shadows. But there's one line I only ever ran once. Just once. And I still think about it more than any other. It runs through what used to be a farming community. Most of it's empty now. Houses collapsed under the weight of time. Old silos leaning like drunks. The fields? Dry. Forgotten. It was like driving through the remains of a memory someone tried to erase. I was filling in for Charlie. He came down with a stomach bug the night before. Dispatch called me in, said it was an easy haul, just one of the midnight freights heading south. Minimal stops. Quiet run. No big deal. I wasn't thrilled about the night shift, but I took it. Figured I'd get some overtime and be back home by sunrise. That night, I met Hank. He was a conductor assigned to the run. Older guy. Wore his cap low. Chewed the inside of his cheek like it owed him money. He didn't talk much at first, just nodded when I introduced myself. But as we were checking the manifest, I noticed his hands. steady but tense, like they'd been holding something invisible for too long. When we climbed up into the cab, I tried to break the ice. "Quiet night for it," I said. He gave a little grunt, barely a sound. Then he turned to me and said, "Just don't freak out if we get company." I laughed, thinking he was joking. "You mean like deer?" He didn't smile, didn't blink, just stared ahead at the windshield like he could already see something out there in the dark. "No," he said real quiet, "not deer." And that was it. He didn't offer anything else. Didn't explain. Just sat back in his chair, folded his arms, and watched the night roll in like a tide. I didn't press him. I figured he was one of those old-timers who liked to mess with the newbies. Or maybe he'd had too much coffee and not enough sleep. Either way, I kept my mouth shut. But something about the way he said it, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes afterward, stuck with me. We rolled out of the yard right on time, but the night didn't feel right. You know how sometimes everything looks normal, but your skin tells you otherwise? That slow crawl under your shirt, like your body knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet? It felt like that, like the air was too still, the dark too thick. I tried to shake it off, focus on the gauges, the signals, the rails stretching out ahead, but there was this heaviness in the cab. Like we were being watched, like something was waiting. I kept glancing at Hank, hoping for some kind of casual shrug or a joke to break the mood, but he just stared forward, unmoving, eyes fixed on the tracks like he didn't dare look away. That stretch of track, it cuts through the dead heart of that old community. No lights, no houses, just mile after mile of empty fields and hollowed-out barns. No towns, no signs of life. I remember thinking, who even built a rail line through here? There's nothing left. And maybe that's what started to get to me. That feeling that we were driving through nowhere. Like we weren't supposed to be there. Like something had been forgotten out in that dark, and we just disturbed it. That stretch of track runs right through what used to be a place called Gray Ridge. If you blink, you might miss it entirely. There's almost nothing left. Just a few rusted silos standing like tired sentinels, some broken-down fences twisted by time, and barns that have fallen in on themselves. It's a ghost of a town, barely hanging on to its past. Years ago, the railroad company decided that line would cut through Ezra Gray's land. Ezra was a stubborn man, proud of his property and unwilling to give it up easily. When the company showed up with papers and promises, he fought them in court. He lost, of course. The law was on their side, and the money wasn't enough to stop the tracks from slicing through his fields. After the verdict, Ezra didn't just walk away. He stood right on the tracks one cold evening, holding a lantern high, daring the train to come through and stop for him. The story goes the engine didn't slow down, not one bit. The light from his lantern flickered, and then it went out. Ezra was gone after that night, vanished without a trace. Folks around here say Ezra's spirit never left. They say he cursed the railroad with his dying breath. And since then, nothing about that stretch has been right. Over the years, trains have derailed without clear cause. Crews have gone missing, and eerie things have been spotted by people passing through. Whispers of ghostly figures walking alongside the tracks at night. Strange sounds that don't belong to any animal or machine. The stories aren't just tales told around campfires. Some are written down in old newspapers, reports of accidents that make no sense, of passengers who disappear between stations. People talk about a presence that watches from the trees, silent and waiting. Even seasoned engineers like me hesitate when the night turns especially dark on that run. There's a feeling, like the land itself remembers Ezra's defiance and won't let go. It's a place heavy with history. Not the kind you find in textbooks, but something raw and unsettled. And every time I think about it, I wonder if some things should be left alone. If some tracks shouldn't be followed too far into the night. That stretch of track runs right through what was once Gray Ridge. There's hardly anything left now, just a few old silos standing crooked, fences covered in rust, and barns that have crumbled into piles of wood and metal. It's a place forgotten by time, except by those who still remember what happened there. Years back, the railroad company decided to build a line straight through Ezra Gray's land. Ezra wasn't the kind of man to take that lying down. He fought the company in court, trying to stop the tracks from cutting across his property. But he lost the case. The law didn't favor him, and the railroad moved ahead. After losing, Ezra did something no one expected. One evening, he stood on the tracks, holding a lantern in his hand. Some say he was daring the train to stop for him. The engine came barreling down, and it never slowed. The lantern's light flickered, and then went out. That was the last anyone saw of Ezra Gray. Since then, people say Ezra cursed the railroad with his final breath. And ever since, strange things have happened along that stretch of track. Trains have derailed without any clear cause. People have vanished, sometimes right from the cars. And there are the stories. Ghostly figures seen walking alongside the rails at night. Voices heard when no one else is around. It's more than just stories, though. Old newspapers tell of accidents and disappearances that don't add up. Workers talk about a presence that lingers near the tracks, something watching and waiting. Even the most experienced engineers hesitate when they pass through Gray Ridge, especially when the night grows dark and quiet. That land holds a memory, a kind of weight you can't shake off. It's like Ezra's defiance still echoes there, refusing to be forgotten. And every time I think about it, I wonder if some places are better left alone, some paths not traveled after dark. That night, something felt off from the moment we left the station. The air had a heaviness to it, like it wasn't quite right. Every so often, the radio would crackle and pop, but no one ever spoke. It was just static, broken by faint, strange noises that didn't make sense. The stars outside didn't look normal either. They seemed blurred, like we were moving through thick fog or water instead of air. It was unsettling, but I shrugged it off at first. Maybe it was just the late hour playing tricks on me. Then I saw it. A small, soft yellow light blinking far off in the distance. At first, I figured it was another train coming down the line. But it wasn't on the schedule, and something about the way it moved didn't feel right. It wasn't speeding toward us like a normal train would. Instead, it hovered there, blinking slowly, almost like it was watching us. Hank, my conductor that night, didn't lose his cool. He just looked over, calm but serious, and said, "Brace yourself. We've got a runner tonight." His voice didn't shake, but there was a quiet edge to it that made me pay attention. A runner. Someone or something that shouldn't be there on the tracks, moving with us in the dark. That light stayed with us as we moved forward. It wasn't just a thing out there. It felt alive, like it was following us, waiting for something. The radio kept spinning out those strange bursts of noise, and the feeling of being watched grew heavier. I started to wonder if this was just my mind playing tricks, or if something real was out there on the tracks with us. Something that didn't belong. That's when the quiet started to break in ways I couldn't explain. The kind of quiet that presses in on you, makes every little sound stand out. My skin crawled, but I kept my eyes on the road ahead. Hank was steady, but even he was watching that blinking light, waiting for whatever was coming next. And I had a sinking feeling that this night was going to be different from every other ride I'd ever taken. That's when we saw it. Out of nowhere, a diesel locomotive appeared on the opposite track. It looked old, rusted, like something from another time. What struck me most was that it made no sound at all. No rumble, no clatter, no vibrations shaking the ground beneath us. It just moved smooth and silent, gliding like a ghost. But the thing is, that track hadn't been used for decades. It was supposed to be abandoned, overgrown, forgotten. As it passed by, I caught sight of the passengers inside, or what looked like passengers. Men in suits from another era, women with torn dresses that fluttered, as if caught in a breeze that wasn't there, and even kids, all sitting perfectly still. Their faces were blank, expressionless, and some of them didn't have eyes at all. Just empty sockets where you'd expect to see something alive. Our engine lights cut through them like they were mist. I could feel the temperature drop Sharply, the air turned cold and heavy. Frost began creeping along the edges of the windows, as if the train was carrying a deep winter inside it. It was like time had folded over itself, mixing past and present in a way that made no sense. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the train vanished. One moment it was there, eerie and still, and the next it was gone, no sign of rust, no track disturbance, nothing. The silence after it passed was overwhelming. Even Hank was quiet, and I knew we both felt the same thing. Something had crossed our path that night. Something that shouldn't have been there. It was a moment that blurred the line between what's real and what isn't, leaving us both wondering if we'd imagined it or if it had really happened. Either way, it changed everything about that ride. After what we saw, Hank finally opened up and shared the whole story. It wasn't just Ezra Gray who had his run-in with this strange line. Over the years, engineers and conductors had disappeared without explanation. Entire trains had vanished from the schedule, never to be seen again. Hank told me he'd seen that ghost train 4 times himself. Each time it appeared, it came closer than before, closer to crossing over into our reality. It wasn't random. He said there was a pattern to these appearances. Each ghost train was modeled after a real train, one that had derailed or simply gone missing somewhere along this line in the past. Some of those trains were never found, their wreckage lost to time or swallowed by the wilderness. Others carried passengers whose names had been forgotten, people erased from memory, as if they never existed. Hank even mentioned a story about a locomotive the company had bought years ago, one they'd paid for but never actually received. It was logged in the records, but it never showed up on the tracks. Some said it must have been one of these ghost trains, trapped somewhere between the past and the present. Hearing all this made me realize that what we'd seen wasn't a one-time anomaly. It was part of a deeper, ongoing mystery, a connection between the living and the lost, tangled up in the rails that cut through this forgotten place. It made me wonder how many stories like this were hiding just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. We were nearly at the yard when the temperature took a sudden plunge. The cold seeped in, creeping over the dashboard like it had a life of its own. Frost spread inch by inch, chilling the cab, making everything feel brittle and fragile. Then, out of nowhere, the emergency brakes slammed on with force that jolted us both. The train ground to an immediate halt, the metal screeching against the rails as if it were protesting. I didn't know what had triggered it. Hank and I just sat there, the silence between us thick and uneasy. Outside the windows, another train was passing by. But this wasn't just any train. It looked like it had come straight from a century ago. Its wooden cars were blackened, worn down by time, and patches of flames flickered along the sides, as if the whole thing was burning but never quite consumed. The passengers inside were frozen in place, but their mouths were open, screaming without a sound. The kind of silence that feels loud in your ears. Then, out of all those faces, one locked eyes with me. Ezra Gray, the same man who had once stood defiantly on these tracks, lantern in hand. His expression was unreadable, but the weight in his gaze was something I couldn't shake. It felt like he was trying to tell me something, maybe a warning, maybe a plea. And then, just like that, everything went black. I came to the crew lounge, disoriented and shaking. Hank told me later that I had collapsed, said it was something that happened to a few folks the first time they encountered that part of the line. But what he never said out loud, what hung unspoken between us, was that I never got assigned to that route again. I never asked him why, and he never offered an explanation. Since then, nights have been different. Sometimes, when everything is quiet, I hear the distant rumble of a train that isn't there. It's faint, almost like a whisper carried on the wind, but I know what it is. And the lights. Sometimes they blink just outside my window, soft and slow, like someone signaling me from the other side. Once, just once, I caught sight of Ezra's lantern across the street. It wasn't bright, not in any normal sense. It was more like a flicker, an echo of something that shouldn't be there. I didn't move. I didn't call out. I just watched until it disappeared. People say ghost trains don't hurt anyone, that they're harmless reminders of the past. But I'm starting to think they're still gathering their crew, still looking for people to join them on those endless tracks. If you ever find yourself staring at a train coming toward you, one that makes no sound, shines no light, and seems to exist without reason, don't wave. Don't move. Just hope with everything you have that it isn't looking to pick up a passenger. What bothered me most was how normal everything looked. You expect haunted places to look broken, graffiti, shattered windows, fog rolling like a movie set. But these woods, they look beautiful, healthy, alive. Thick trees, soft moss, winding trails. Nothing that screamed danger. And maybe that's why people went in. You see a place like that, and you let your guard down. You think, let's take a walk, get some fresh air, stretch our legs. And you don't stop to ask why nobody else is out there. Why the trails don't have markers. Why there aren't birds singing overhead. You just go, and some don't come back. We were already 2 beers past good judgment. Will said he knew a spot. You'll never see stars like this anywhere else, he said. Of course. He couldn't point out on the map. He just waved his hand toward the tree line, like it was obvious. The kind of confidence that comes after a few drinks and a head full of nothing to fear. So we followed him like idiots. The sky was clear. I remember that. The kind of clear that makes you feel small in a good way. At first, the woods were ordinary. Damp roots, soft ground, branches whispering the breeze. But after a while, the sounds dropped off. No crickets, no owls, no leaves rustling. Just the crunch of our boots and the occasional shuffle of someone turning their head too fast, because they thought they heard something behind them. Every now and then, something would snap out there in the dark. Not loud, just enough to make us stop and stare into the nothing, pretending we weren't a little unnerved. We didn't talk much after the first 15 minutes. It's like the silence soaked into us. Even we'll stop cracking jokes. It wasn't fear, not yet. Just the kind of hush that makes you feel like you're walking into a place that doesn't want you announcing your presence. Then we came to the clearing. Wide, open, round, too perfect to be natural. The grass was short, trimmed almost. No roots, no rocks. It looked like someone had planned it, like they'd laid out with string and measuring tape and made sure every inch stayed untouched by the rest of the forest. And right in the center of it stood a man. He wasn't hunched or hiding or startled by us crashing to the edge of the trees. He didn't move at all, just stood there with his arms hanging loosely by his sides. His clothes were clean, his skin almost white under the moonlight. I couldn't see his eyes, not really, but I felt them land on each of us, one by one. There was nothing about him that screamed threat. No knife, no growl, no warning. He wasn't even close enough to reach us. But we didn't speak. We didn't wave. We just stood there, staring, waiting for him to say something first. He didn't. And the longer we waited, the more wrong it felt. It's hard to explain why. If you ask me now, I couldn't tell you what made that moment so heavy. He didn't move. He didn't speak. And maybe that was a problem. Everything in us expected something. Some cue, some shift, some explanation. But he gave us nothing. Like we were the ones who had interrupted something. Like we were the mistake. We'll try to say something. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and he gave up. Simon shifted his weight back like he was getting ready to step away. But he didn't. I couldn't tell you what I was thinking, because it wasn't thinking anymore. It was just this fog of instinct, like every part of me had gone still. So I could hear whatever was about to happen. But nothing did. We stood there long enough for it to feel like hours, though I'm sure it was only minutes. And then, quietly, like we'd agreed without saying anything, we turned around and walked back into the woods. No one ran. No one said a word. We just moved, one step at a time, like we didn't want to spook something. When we finally made it back to the cabin, we didn't talk about what we saw. Not that night. We went straight to our rooms. No jokes, no music, just the sound of doors clicking shut behind us. And for the first time since we arrived, I locked mine. I didn't even think about it. My hand just did it. I told myself he was a hiker, a camper, somebody who wandered in just like us. But I didn't believe it, not even a little. You don't stand like that, out in the open, waiting in silence for strangers to arrive. You don't wear clothes that clean in woods that deep. You don't belong like that unless you've been there longer than the trees. That night, I kept waking up. No reason. Just snapping awake, like I'd heard my name whispered in a room I didn't recognize. I'd stare at the ceiling until my eyes adjusted to dark, listening to the nothing outside. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man. Standing. Still. Waiting. Like the woods hadn't forgotten him. Like they'd made room for him. And maybe, just maybe, they were waiting for us to do the same. He spoke like he was used to being listened to. Not loud, not harsh, just steady. Like he knew exactly what words to choose and didn't waste any. His voice carried through the clearing without effort, like it had space to stretch. He asked if we believed in God, then beauty, then sacrifice. Same tone for all three, like they belonged together somehow. His face never changed when he spoke. His lips moved, yes, but nothing else followed. No blinking, no twitching at the corners of his mouth. Just that same smile, as if it had been carved into him. I remember the flask. Small, silver, no label, no engravings. He held out like it was a gift, polite, even generous. Will took it without hesitation. I think he wanted to prove something, maybe that he wasn't scared. He took a long sip, wiped his mouth, and passed it to Simon. No reaction, no cough, no comment, just handed it over, like it was normal to drink from a stranger's flask in the middle of the forest that doesn't make noise. Simon drank too, slower, but he didn't hesitate. Then they both looked at me. I wasn't trying to be brave or cautious. I was just stuck. The kind of stuck where your hands don't move, and you're not sure whether it's fear or instinct or both. But I took it. I took it because saying no felt worse than drinking whatever was in that thing. And when I swallowed, the taste didn't hit me. Not right away. It was warmth without flavor, like swallowing fog. And that's when it started to pull apart. It wasn't instant. It crept in, slow, quiet. First, the sky looked too deep, like the stars had drifted too far away, and the black between them was heavier than usual. Then the trees, they didn't sway. They leaned, forward, inward, like they were listening. The man didn't move. At least I didn't see him move. But I swear he was closer. Just enough that we all noticed, and none of us said anything. I want to say something. I remember that clearly. I opened my mouth, but my jaw didn't quite work right, like the muscles were remembering a different command. Simon started to mutter. At first, I thought he was just mumbling to himself, but then the words started looping. The same phrases, over and over. The mouse in the ground. He kept saying, they're still chewing. They never stop. His voice got thinner each time, like his throat was running out of space. Will stood there for a moment, blinking slowly. Then his nose started bleeding. A slow stream, down his lip, onto his shirt. He touched it like it surprised him. Then he fell. Just dropped. No warning. No sound. Like a puppet with the strings cut. His head hit the ground hard, but he didn't even flinch. Just laid there, eyes wide, staring at nothing. His breathing was shallow, like he'd forgotten how it was supposed to work. I didn't move, not because I didn't want to. I couldn't. It was like the air around me had thickened. Everything felt stretched, my limbs, the air, even the time between heartbeats. I was aware of Simon crouching now, his hands pressing to the dirt, his mouth still moving, and the man still smiling, still watching. Like this was all going according to some quiet plan, like he'd done this before. I looked at the flask again, lying on the ground now, beside Will's hand. The metal glinted, even though there was no light to catch. And for one long second, I thought about picking up again, not to drink, just to hold it, to see if it was real, because everything else around me had started to feel wrong. There's a moment right before your mind snaps to panic, where your body tries to explain things away. Maybe the drink was laced. Maybe we were just drunk and tired and scared. But those explanations don't hold up when the trees won't stand still, and your friend is bleeding from the face and whispering about teeth in the earth like they're family secrets. The ground beneath us felt unsteady, though it didn't move. That's what made it worse. There was no shaking, no noise, just the feeling that we were standing on something that knew we were there, like we'd been noticed. And whatever had noticed us didn't mind waiting. We weren't in the woods anymore. Not really. At least, not the woods we'd walked into. Something had shifted, and we hadn't caught it in time. Maybe it was the drink. Maybe it was him. Maybe we were never supposed to find that clearing in the first place. But we had. And now we weren't sure if we were still allowed to leave. It didn't let go of me. Not after we got out. Not after the shaking stopped. Not even after we started talking again. And Simon finally slept through a night without mumbling about mouse in the ground. Whatever happened out there, it stuck like smoke in my lungs. So I did what I could. I looked into it, dug where I shouldn't have, asked questions people didn't want to hear, and read things that felt older than the pages they were printed on. Longfield's history wasn't just strange. It was avoided, sanitized. The way the town smiled a little too fast when you asked about the woods. The way the old-timers paused, then changed the subject, like they were rewinding something in their heads and deciding it was better left there. That kind of silence isn't accidental. It's trained. The hollow grounds had another name once. Older, hard to pronounce. The syllables twisted in my mouth when I said them out loud, like they didn't belong there. Not really. I found maps hand-drawn, stitched together from journals that didn't agree on where the trails ended. And in all of them, somewhere in the middle was a blank space. No trees, no landmarks, just an open mark, the same size. Every time, people used to gather there, not for celebrations or affairs, but for something else, something private. They didn't leave records, only stories. Whispers passed down by families who left the town and didn't come back, or by children who grew up knowing never to go past a certain tree line. There were sacrifices, not dramatic or theatrical. They were orderly, chosen, 3 at a time, always 3. No randomness, no accidents. Every 50 years, the pattern repeated, and each time, it was like the town exhaled when it was done. I found newspaper clippings, brittle with age, yellowed corners, names you don't hear anymore. In one, from 1862, a headline simply read, 3 gone. Again, the article was only 6 sentences long. No outrage, no call for search parties. Just a note of the missing and a quote from an unnamed source. It's the land's way. Better they went quietly. Another story, later, probably around 1912, told of a man with pale skin and clean clothes who would be seen near the edge of the woods whenever the dates lined up. Some call him a preacher. Others said he was a guide. But the phrase that kept coming up was lured them in. He didn't drag anyone, didn't force. He just spoke, calm, precise, like he knew exactly what to say. Some of the oldest records weren't even written in English. They were more like symbols, scratched into leather bindings, drawn with ink that had turned to dust at the edges. I didn't understand most of it, but one thing stood out, over and over, like a chorus. The land remembers. Well, didn't want to hear any of it. I tried to tell him, sat him down, laid out everything I'd found. He nodded, but I could see it behind his eyes. He was already deciding to forget. Some people need things to end. Need there to be a line they can step over and call it done. I couldn't do that. Not with everything I knew now. Because here's the part that really gutted me. The warning. Someone had tried to tell us. A woman at the diner, just before we left. I remember she had this look, half tired, half scared. She asked where we were headed, and when we'll mention the clearing, her face tightened. She didn't say, "Don't go." She just asked, "Do you hear things at night?" I laughed, brushed it off. I thought she was being weird, maybe superstitious. But she looked right at me and said, "Sometimes they pick who listens." It didn't let go of me. Not after we got out. Not after the shaking stopped. Not even after we started talking again. And Simon finally slept through a night without mumbling about mouse in the ground. Whatever happened out there, it stuck like smoke in my lungs. So I did what I could. I looked into it, dug where I shouldn't have, asked questions people didn't want to hear, and read things that felt older than the pages they were printed on. Longfield's history wasn't just strange. It was avoided, sanitized, the way the town smiled a little too fast when you asked about the woods, the way the old-timers paused, then changed the subject, like they were rewinding something in their heads and deciding it was better left there. That kind of silence isn't accidental. It's trained. The Hollow Grounds had another name once. Older, harder to pronounce. The syllables twisted in my mouth when I said them out loud, like they didn't belong there. Not really. I found maps hand-drawn, stitched together from journals that didn't agree on where the trails ended. And in all of them, somewhere in the middle, was a blank space. No trees, no landmarks, just an open mark. The same size. Every time, people used to gather there, not for celebrations or fairs, but for something else, something private. They didn't leave records, only stories. Whispers passed down by families who left the town and didn't come back, or by children who grew up knowing never to go past a certain tree line. There were sacrifices, not dramatic or theatrical. They were orderly, chosen, 3 at a time, always 3. No randomness, no accidents. Every 50 years, the pattern repeated. And each time, it was like the town exhaled when it was done. I found newspaper clippings, brittle with age, yellowed corners, names you don't hear anymore. In one, from 1862, a headline simply read, 3 gone. Again, the article was only 6 sentences long. No outrage, no call for search parties. Just a note of the missing and a quote from an unnamed source. It's the land's way. Better they went quietly. Another story later, probably around 1912, told of a man with pale skin and clean clothes who would be seen near the edge of the woods whenever the dates lined up. Some called him a preacher. Others said he was a guide. But the phrase that kept coming up was lured them in. He didn't drag anyone, didn't force. He just spoke, calm, precise, like he knew exactly what to say. Some of the oldest records weren't even written in English. They were more like symbols, scratched into leather bindings, drawn with ink that had turned to dust at the edges. I didn't understand most of it, but one thing stood out, over and over, like a chorus. The land remembers. Well, didn't want to hear any of it. I tried to tell him. Sat him down, laid out everything I'd found. He nodded, but I could see it behind his eyes. He was already deciding to forget. Some people need things to end. Need there to be a line they can step over and call it done. I couldn't do that. Not with everything I knew now. Because here's the part that really gutted me. The warning. Someone had tried to tell us. A woman at the diner, just before we left. I remember she had this look, half tired, half scared. She asked where we were headed, and when we'll mention the clearing, her face tightened. She didn't say, "Don't go." She just asked, "Do you hear things at night?" I laughed, brushed it off. I thought she was being weird, maybe superstitious. But she looked right at me and said, "Sometimes they pick who listens." It didn't land at the time. I nodded, paid, walked out. But now, I can't stop thinking about it. She knew. Maybe not the whole picture, but enough. Enough to see the pattern, and know we were stepping into it. We were the next 3, right on schedule, right where we weren't supposed to be. And somehow we made it out. But here's the part one don't say out loud. Not to Will, not to Simon, not even to myself when the lights are off. I don't think we escaped. I think we were let go. Because whatever waits in those woods doesn't just take. It chooses. And maybe next time, it won't be so generous. I don't remember the order anymore. Just flashes. Sounds. The way Simon's voice cracked when he screamed, sharp and wet like something had torn his throat. He bolted into the trees with nothing in his hands, no plan, just raw panic. I still don't know if he ever came out. I still listen for him sometimes, stupid as that sounds, as if he might just walk up the road one day and ask what he missed. What was different? His body, I can't describe it right. It didn't break. It changed. Bend in a way that bones shouldn't bend. The kind of movement that makes you question whether the person in front of you is still made of the same material you are. It wasn't violent. It was worse than violent. It was quiet, controlled, like it was happening according to rules we were never meant to understand. And the man, the one we followed in like children chasing stories, he didn't run, didn't look back. He just turned and disappeared into the trees, as if nothing left to prove. Like whatever he came for had already been claimed. His stride was steady, calm, like this was just another part of the process. And he had other places to be. I remember trying to lift Will, my arms under him, fingers digging into his shirt, something slippery on my hands. I don't know if it was blood or sweat or something else entirely. Then I felt it, underneath us, in the dirt, a slow, dull thump, like the earth itself had a rhythm, and we were standing on top of it. I thought it was my own heartbeat at first, but no, it was too deep, too slow. It didn't match me. It belonged to something else. I dropped him. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't. It was just instinct. That pulse hit, and every part of me screamed to run, to get my feet off that ground and move. I didn't care where. North, south, straight into a tree. I didn't think. I ran like my body knew something my mind wasn't ready to process. I must have hit the road. I don't remember doing it. My legs kept going even after the trees thinned, even after the silence came back. There was no relief, just space. I guess that's what saved me. I woke up face down in dirt, filthy, alone, my mouth full of grit, and the sun somewhere overhead. At first, I thought I was still dreaming, that maybe I'd fallen asleep in the car and the whole thing was a bad dream stitched together by my brain to punish me for something. But the taste in my mouth, the ache in my legs, the bruises blooming across my ribs, those were real. And Will wasn't there. Neither was Simon. The cabin door was open. I don't remember unlocking it. There were scratches on the floor. I noticed that later. Deep ones, carved into like something had been dragged, or resisted being dragged. I never figured out which. I sat there for hours, just breathing, listening. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat with it. The silence. The knowing. That moment when everything that made sense in the world had been pulled apart like wet paper, and all I could do was sit among the scraps and pretend it wasn't my life lying in pieces. Sometimes I wonder if that man still walks those woods. If someone else will see him, smile back at him, maybe even follow him. I wonder if they'll feel that pulse. If they'll know to run. I didn't. Not soon enough. And now I'm just what's left. Simon's been in a facility for over a year now. They keep him in a quiet room with thick windows and rubber corners. He doesn't speak, doesn't look anyone in the eye, just stares at the walls and fills every inch of paper they give him with the same thing. Circles, not neat ones. Jagged, crooked, frantic loops that start tight and explode outward like something inside him is trying to crawl out through his hand. They tried taking away the pencils once. He uses fingernails instead, so they gave the pencils back. As for Will, I had to tell his parents he vanished. That's what the police settled on. He must have wandered off, they said. Injured. Maybe disoriented. They use words like exposure and wildlife and probable drowning. They even brought in dogs. The dogs wouldn't go past the clearing. Just stood there whining, tails down, ears pinned back. They couldn't explain that part, so they didn't write it down. The official story ended with an empty report and a closed file. But his mother still calls me on his birthday. Every year, just to ask if I've remembered anything new. She never says his name. Just him. Like speaking it might make the truth too real. I've changed since then. I don't drink anymore. Not because I'm trying to stay clean or start fresh. Because I'm afraid. Afraid of what I'll see if I lower my guard. Because when the night gets too still and the house settles just right, I start to hear it again. That whisper. Low. Wet. Too close to be imagined. Too far to be traced. I've ripped up my floorboards twice, thinking I'd find something breathing beneath them. And then there's the man. I see him in crowds. At the gas station, standing near the windshield fluid. At a bus stop I pass on the way to work. Once, in the reflection of a diner window, I turned around and he wasn't there. He never gets closer. Just watches, like he's waiting for something, or someone. I've told myself 1,000 times that it's just trauma, just leftovers my brain can't digest. But that doesn't explain the dreams. They're never different. I'm always in the woods, always trying to run. The trees bend the wrong way. The ground pulses, and his voice follows me like smoke, thick and clinging. He never yells, just speaks, calm. Measured, asking if I believe. I moved once, out of state, burned the clothes I wore that night, blocked Simon's mother's number, threw away every map that mentioned Longfield. It didn't matter. The air still smells like pine sometimes. Damp pine, the kind you only get after rain seeps into bark. And every so often, I wake up with dirt under my nails. I don't know where it comes from. I live in an apartment now. No plants, no soil, no excuses. So listen to me. Really listen. If you ever find yourself in Longfield, Massachusetts, don't take shortcuts through the woods. Don't go wandering off the marked paths just because your phone tells you there's a faster route. And if a man offers you a drink, no matter how thirsty, no matter how friendly he looks, turn around, walk away, don't say a word, just go. Because he's still out there, and the ground remembers. They say I abandoned him, that I ran. But if you heard what I did over that phone, you understand why I dropped it and never looked back. The thing that answered me wasn't human. My name is Randolph Carter. I've spent most of my life with my nose buried in old books. Texts forgotten by time and left to gather dust on library shelves no one visits anymore. The kind of books people whisper about, laugh off, or outright ban. They call them folklore, superstition, madness. But I read them anyway. I had to. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew they weren't just stories. They were warnings. I met Harley Warren in college. He was older than me, sharper too. There was something about him, something electric. He had a way of speaking that made even the most outlandish ideas sound perfectly reasonable. And he never laughed at the things I believed in. If anything, he encouraged them. We shared an obsession with what others call the occult, only where I was content to study. To translate and interpret, Warren always needed more. It wasn't enough to read about the unknown. He had to see it, touch it, prove it. I remember the first time he showed me one of his books. It didn't have a title. The pages were old, stitched together with thread that looked like it would crumble at a touch. The writing wasn't English. I'm still not sure what it was. Warren said it was a mix, Arabic, Latin, something else, something older. His hands shook when he opened it, like he wasn't sure whether to be thrilled or terrified. He never explained where he got it, only said that it had led him to a place he wanted to explore. And he wanted me with him. We'd been on trips before. Abandoned churches, forgotten crypts, lost cemeteries buried under brush and rot. Strange places, quiet places. And every time, Warren would go just a little further than I was comfortable with. He'd speak in tongues I didn't understand. He'd pull objects from the ground like he'd always known they were there. Once, I found him half buried in a collapsed tomb, his fingers bleeding, laughing as if he discovered gold. It scared me. I didn't say anything, but it scared me. Still, I went with him. Again and again. Because I trusted him. Or maybe I just didn't want to be left behind. Then came the night he told me about the cemetery in the swamp. He brought it up casually, as if it were just another trip, another test of courage. He laid out the details like they were part of an ordinary conversation. Coordinates, weather reports, packing lists. But something in his eyes told a different story. He didn't blink as he spoke. He barely moved. And when I asked where he'd found the location, he just smiled and said, "It's in the book." I should have asked more. I should have pressed him. But I didn't. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe I already knew too much. That night felt different from the start. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last trip. The way Warren stood over a cracked gravestone for nearly an hour, without saying a word. Or the way he spoke in whispers for days afterward, like something might hear him if he talked too loud. He didn't seem afraid exactly. More focused. Possessed, almost. I remember asking him, just once, if he ever worried we were going too far. If maybe there were things we weren't meant to uncover. He looked at me, eyes tired and distant, and said, "If it's there, it's meant to be found. And if it's meant to be found, we'll find it." That was Warren. Always certain. Always chasing the next veil to tear through, the next secret to expose. I respected him for it. I envied him, even, but I never matched him. I couldn't. This was the last trip we'd ever take together. I didn't know it then. I still thought we'd come back, talk about what we saw, maybe even laugh about it years later. I thought we'd get old and tell stories about the time we snuck into crypts and read from books with no titles. I thought Warren would always be there, just a few steps ahead of me, lighting the way into the dark. I was wrong. It was in the big cypress swamp, far from any marked trail, past the trees that bent too low in the water that never seemed to dry up. You had to hike through mud that sucked at your boots like it wanted to hold you in place, under sky that always felt too heavy, too low. And there, hidden behind a curtain of hanging moss and knotted vines, we found it. Or rather, Warren found it. He'd marked the spot days earlier in that old book of his. The pages were brittle, the ink almost bled out by time, but he studied them like scripture. He said the place was real, and now, standing there, I believed him. There was no path leading in, no signage, no fence. It wasn't on any modern map, no mention in local archives, nothing that could have prepared us for what we saw. Just stone markers, crooked and broken, jutting from the ground like teeth. Most of them were unreadable, worn smooth by decades, maybe centuries, of rain and neglect. Some leaned, so far they looked like they were trying to fall back into the earth. Others had sunk entirely, leaving only a hint of something buried deep beneath the moss and roots. The air there was still in a way that made your ears ring. I remember standing at the edge of the clearing, my boots wet, eyes scanning row after row of forgotten graves, and feeling uneasy, like we weren't supposed to be there. Not in the usual way, like trespassing on someone's land. No, this was different. This felt like we'd stepped into a place that had been left alone for a reason. There was one tomb in particular that stood out. It was low to the ground, square-shaped, half swallowed by the underbrush. Vines curled around the stone, like they were trying to hold it shut. The door was sealed, or had been. The stone slab that once blocked the entrance had cracked in two, and I could just barely make out a dark gap beneath it, like a mouth opening after a long sleep. Warren was fixated on it. He barely said a word, just kept staring, then flipping through that book, then staring again. I asked around later. Spoke to a few locals while Warren gathered supplies. Most wouldn't say much. Some laughed it off, but you could tell they didn't think it was funny. One man, an old fisherman with hands like leather, went quiet the moment I mentioned the cemetery. He stared at me for a long time, then simply said, "You don't want to go near that place, son. Let the dead stay where they are." Then he turned and walked off. Wouldn't answer another word. I don't know who built it. No records, no names, just crumbling stones in a tomb that didn't fit any style I'd ever seen. The carvings on the side weren't in English or anything else I could recognize. Strange symbols, curved, jagged, deliberate. It looked ancient, wrong, even, like it didn't belong in this part of the world, or any part. Warren was convinced we were standing on something important. I wasn't so sure. There was something about that place that pressing on you. Like the air was thicker there. Like time moved slower. Even the birds kept away. No insects, no rustling in the trees. Just silence, as if the whole swamp was holding its breath. I stood there, looking at that broken tomb, and I remember thinking, it wasn't just forgotten, it had been hidden, and whatever was inside wasn't meant to be found. We came prepared, or so I thought. 2 lanterns, a length of sturdy rope, and that old army field telephone with the coiled wire. Warren carried most of it, confident as always, with a look in his eye like this was just another routine excavation. I'd seen that look before, when he dug through old churches, when he cracked open crypts no one had dared touch. But this time felt different. He was quieter, not nervous, no, just focused, like the tomb had already started speaking to him. And he was listening. He told me he'd go alone, said the space below was too narrow for both of us. And besides, someone needed to stay with the phone. I didn't argue. Maybe part of me didn't want to go down there. Maybe I was relieved to stay in the open air, even if the air itself felt too still. Warren's voice came through the handset steady at first. He gave me measurements, described the walls, carvings again, even older than the ones above. He said the chamber opened wider than he expected, said it was drier than a swamp tomb had any right to be. He sounded almost pleased. I sat cross-legged in the moss, the wire stretched taut into the ground beside the cracked tomb slab, and listened. Then his voice started to change. At first, I thought it was a line. The signal fuzz now and then, that soft static buzz you get with old equipment. But then I heard it. A scrape. Not like a shuffle or a rock sliding. No, this was deliberate. Slow. As if something heavy was being pulled across stone. I waited, ear pressed close, heart tapping a little faster. I called out, asked him what it was. He didn't answer right away. Then came the whisper of shifting earth. A low groan, like pressure building inside the stone. And underneath it all, quiet, barely there, breathing. Not Warren's. His was always shallow when he was working, quick little puffs between excited sentences. This was slower, wet, and too close to the receiver. I looked down at the lantern. The flame had begun to shiver, though there was no breeze. I held my hand out, testing the air. Nothing moved. Still, the light quivered like it wanted to die. There was a cold, too. Not sharp or biting, just wrong. The kind that doesn't come with wind. Doesn't sink into your skin like regular chill. It just is. Like it's coming from the inside out. I gripped the receiver harder, pressed a button, and asked him again, "What do you see, Warren?" His reply came slower now, less certain. He mentioned colors, ones he didn't have names for. He said the walls were shifting, that the symbols were changing shape. I told myself he was just excited, seeing things in the dim lantern light. People imagine all sorts of things underground. I reminded myself of that, again and again. Then he stopped describing. His voice dropped low. He said there was something else. Something moving. He didn't describe it. Just said, "It's looking at me." In this soft, flat tone I'd never heard from him before. Like his mind had turned away from his mouth and left it to speak on its own. The lantern flickered again. I felt a twitch in the wire beneath my hand, like a tremor from far away, carried through copper and soil. And still that sound, that breathing, still there on the line, slow and wet and steady. I told myself it was nerves, just darkness playing tricks. But even then, even sitting in the open air of the trees, above and the ground beneath me, I felt something shift, something I couldn't name, something that knew I was there, listening, waiting. And Warren kept going deeper. I stayed there with the handset pressed so tight to my ear it left a mark on my skin. Warren's voice had gone strange, dry, breathy, and uneven. He wasn't speaking to me anymore. He was whispering, but the words weren't for me. His tone had changed from curious to cautious, from cautious to something else entirely. It was the kind of whisper a man uses when he's afraid he'll be heard, and more afraid he won't be. I caught only fragments, half-words, names I'd never heard before. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't anything I'd studied. I'd never heard him speak like that, reverent and frightened at once, like he'd found something worth worshipping and it had turned its gaze on him. Then nothing. No breath. No static. Just silence. Not the kind that hums or buzzes, but the kind that makes you aware of every beat in your chest, every shift in the dirt under your boots. It went on. A full minute. Then another. I called down. No answer. Just my voice carrying into the stillness, swallowed by it. I pressed the button harder, as if that would make a difference. I tried to keep my voice steady. I failed. Then, sudden and sharp through the line, his voice. "Carter, for the love of God, get out." He wasn't asking. He was pleading. His breath hitched. His words clipped and rushed, like they were being shoved out of him. It wasn't panic I heard. It was terror. Real terror. The kind that strips a man of reason, and leaves only the truth behind it. I could almost see him then. Lantern swinging wildly in the dark, eyes locked on something I couldn't imagine. "They've seen me," he said. "They know I'm here." I didn't ask who. I didn't want to know. And then I heard them. Footsteps. They didn't echo like his did. They were softer, slower. They didn't rise toward me. They moved sideways, circling, listening, not rushing, not stumbling, just deliberate, like they had time, like they were certain he didn't. I didn't know what to do. I kept calling, kept pressing the receiver so hard into my head it felt like it might crack my skull. I said his name over and over again until it lost its meaning. Then quiet, a final whisper. "You can't help me. No one can. Don't call again." His voice was steady now, cold, like he'd made some decision I couldn't understand, like something had been made clear to him, and that clarity had broken something in him. And then silence again. I didn't hang up. I couldn't, because if I did, if I let go of that handset, I knew I would never hear his voice again. I didn't leave the swamp right away. I should have. Anyone with sense would have turned and run until the trees gave way to roads and the roads led home. But I stayed, not out of bravery. Curiosity has a grip of its own, and Warren had left behind more than just silence. In the days that followed, I went through his journals. He kept them hidden, even from me, worn leather, stitched by hand, margins crowded with notes so dense they bled into each other. The ink changed colors. Some entries looked like they were etched in something that had dried red. I found sketches drawn in hurried strokes, shapes that didn't belong to any known geometry. They weren't diagrams. They weren't art. They were glimpses, as if he was trying to replicate something his mind couldn't fully hold. There were symbols that defied translation. They had angles that bent the wrong way. Some repeated themselves without matching. It didn't follow any script I knew. Latin? No. It was older. He thought it came from a time before written language had form. A time when memory was passed through blood, not ink. Then came the name. It was there, always in the margins, always scrawled smaller than the rest, as though he didn't want to draw attention to it, as though even writing it gave it notice. The name looked simple at first, 5 letters, and yet when I tried to pronounce it, my tongue stopped short. It wasn't built for a human mouth. Warren had written it dozens of times. Every time it appeared, the handwriting twisted. By the end, it didn't even look like his. That name, it stayed with me, not just on the page. I heard it, in dreams, in the silence between two sounds, in the moments just before waking. It had weight. It had will. And Warren, he didn't find the place by chance. He'd been tracking it. He believed there were doors hidden across the world. Thin places, with a veil between here and something else wore away. Most were sealed. Some were watched. This one had been forgotten. Buried, but not empty. He wasn't the first to find it. That much I came to understand. There were entries that weren't his. Pages sewn into the back of his journal. Different paper, different ink, older spelling. Warnings written in strange English. And names. A list, maybe dozens, all with dates, all ending the same way. No return. Warren read those pages. He knew the pattern. Still, he went. He believed he would be the one to come back, to speak the name and not lose himself, to find the truth and carry it to the surface. He thought knowledge was enough. He was wrong. That place, it wasn't meant to be uncovered. It wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. And Warren, in his hunger for understanding, had fed it. I begged him. With everything in me, I begged him to come back. I didn't care about the research. I didn't care about the name or the symbols or the gate he swore he had found. I just wanted him out. I wanted my friend back above the soil. I told him we'd leave together. I told him we'd never speak of it again. I promised things I knew I couldn't keep. I just wanted to hear his voice. But the line went quiet. No breath. No static. Just silence, so complete it made the air around me feel too loud. I held the receiver tighter, like pressure would force a response. Then it came, faint at first, like the wind dragging its feet across a wire. Then static, a hum, low and sharp, that pierced my ear. I flinched, pulled the receiver back, and then I heard it, a voice, but it wasn't his. I knew Warren's voice better than my own. This thing that spoke, it didn't belong in any man's throat. It had the shape of words, but none of the warmth, none of the weight that makes a voice human. It was flat, final. "You fool," it said. "Warren is dead." That's when I dropped it. The receiver hit the ground and rolled toward the edge of the stones. I didn't pick it up. My legs were shaking. My hands were worse. But I didn't run. I couldn't. Something in me, something older than fear, held me in place. I backed away from the tomb, one step at a time, careful, like any sudden movement would draw its attention. My body knew something I hadn't accepted yet, that I wasn't alone, that I was being watched, not from the trees, not from the dark above, from below. Then I heard it, not footsteps, not exactly, but a sound like movement, slow, deliberate, like something testing its grip on stone, clawing its way upward, not fast, steady, confident. I turned and walked. Not quickly. I didn't dare. I felt every inch of ground beneath my feet. I counted each step, not with numbers, but with breath. In, out, one after the other. And I never looked back. That's the only reason I'm still here. Because something told me that if I had turned, if I had given it even one glance, it would have taken that as permission, an invitation. And I wouldn't be telling you any of this. They said I left him. The official report, written in crisp ink on indifferent paper, calls it abandonment. I stood before a panel of officers, some skeptical, some bored, as they asked me the same questions over and over, as though they expected the truth to arrive on the 15th repetition. But they never heard the voice. They never held that receiver to their ear and felt their skin recoil at the sound that came through. They didn't feel the cold that lingered after I dropped the line. They didn't walk away with something clinging to the soles of their boots or the back of their minds. I stopped trying to convince anyone. It's easier that way. Let them believe I panicked, that I ran from the ruins of my own cowardice, that I couldn't face the weight of what we uncovered. Fine, let them write their version. They didn't see the way my hands shook for weeks, how I started waking up at exactly 2:47 every morning, soaked in sweat, heart pounding like I just sprinted through the night. I'd see Warren sometimes, briefly, in the dream, but it wasn't really him. It wore his shape, borrowed his tone, but something about the way it stood, the way it smiled, no. That thing wasn't my friend. I can't read the old books anymore. You know the ones. Ancient languages, dead scripts, pages that smell like rot and dust. Used to be my life. Now, I won't touch them. The shapes of those letters crawl across my eyes even when I close them. I see them in ceiling cracks and coffee stains, and the pattern of leaves on the sidewalk. I burned my notes. All of them. Didn't watch them turn to ash. Just lit the match, dropped it in, and walked away. And the sound. Static. That low hiss. It could be from a radio, a TV, even a passing car. Doesn't matter. Every time I hear it, my skin prickles. I freeze. My mind races back to that moment. to the silence that followed, to the voice that wasn't his. I've smashed more radios than I care to admit. Threw out every device that carries a signal. Doesn't make a difference. I moved, of course, far from the swamps. New name, new town. Changed everything down to the way I part my hair. But sometimes, just sometimes, when the air is too still, when the night hangs just a little too heavy, I swear I hear something. A soft click. Faint but distinct. Like a line opening. A call connecting. And then a whisper. Not Warren. Never Warren. But it says my name. So if you're ever out that way, near the swamps, near anything ancient that looks like it's better left alone, listen to me. Don't linger. Don't ask questions. Don't wonder what lies beneath. And for God's sake, don't answer the call. We opened the coffin, expecting bones. What we found was nothing. No body. No remains. Just an empty box buried in untouched soil. Calm but deeply unsettled tone. Let silence sit between words. I didn't believe in ghost stories. Until I became one of them. Before we go on, drop your city or country in the comments. I want to know just how far this story travels. My name's not important. Never was. People forget names anyway. What matters is where I worked. My family owns a cemetery. Has for generations. I was 12 the first time I saw a dead body. Didn't flinch. My grandfather said that meant I was ready. That it was in my blood. Like it wasn't something I chose. Just something that came with the name. Back then, I didn't question it. I just followed orders, swept the leaves, pulled weeds, helped dig when we were short on hands. By 15, I knew every headstone by heart. Who was buried where. Which ones got visitors. Which ones never did. Some plots had fresh flowers every week. Others hadn't seen a footstep in decades. You start to learn things out there. What time does to stone? What time does to memory? Most days it was quiet, routine. People think graveyards are eerie, but I always found them peaceful. Until that job, it was supposed to be simple. A land negotiation with the city. They wanted to run a new road through the far end of the property. That meant moving the graves. It wasn't the first time we'd done it. Call in a permit. Get a team. Exhume the remains. Rebury with respect. Sign the papers. Done. We got started in early spring. I remember the frost still clung to the ground when we began. We worked slow. Careful. Each grave marked. Each casket cataloged. It was all going according to plan, until we reached the last section. That part of the cemetery was older, less maintained. Most of the names had worn off the stones. The grass grew uneven. You could feel the difference in the air when you stepped into that row, like something was watching, not unfriendly, just waiting. One grave in particular didn't line up. Records said there was supposed to be a man buried there, late 1800s. But when we got the plot, there were no signs it had ever been dug. The earth was untouched. No settling, no marker. Just a plot number in the records. That's it. The crew marked it out, just like the others. I remember standing there with the clipboard, frowning at the paper. The name didn't ring a bell. I'd never heard it, never seen it on any of the stones. Still, we had a job to do. When they started digging, I stayed back. Something about it didn't sit right. The deeper they went, the quieter things got. You know how when you're out in nature, there's always some noise, birds, wind, maybe a passing car. This? Nothing. Just the sound of shovels hitting dirt. I should have walked away. I should have said something. But I didn't. I just stood there. And that's where this story really begins. Pinelawn Memorial Park. Peaceful name, right? Sounds like a place where people go to leave flowers, say a few words, maybe sit on a bench and let the silence do the talking. That's how most folks knew it. Quiet cemetery tucked just outside of town, hemmed in by trees and old iron fences. The kind of place people only visit twice in their life. Once to bury someone and once to be buried themselves. But if you grew up around it, you knew better. You knew there were parts of it you didn't talk about. My grandfather called it the last third. That's what he always said. Never by any official name. Just the last third. The oldest part of the grounds. He never explained why, but he made it clear. Don't go there alone. Don't linger too long. And whatever you do, don't speak the names you see on those headstones. Even if you can still read them. That section sat farthest from the road. No paved paths led to it. Just worn grass and crooked markers. Half the trees back there were dead or dying, but somehow they never fell. Storms would come and go, and while the rest of the park had branches strewn about, the last third looked untouched, like time gave up on it. I remember asking him once why we didn't just clean it up, get some maintenance going, put up new signs. He didn't answer, just gave me this look, like he wanted to say something, but didn't trust the words to come out right. That was the last time I asked, so we left it alone. For years, it was there, but out of mind. Visitors never asked about it. New employees avoided it without being told. Somehow, people just knew, like the place spoke to them, even if only in whispers they didn't fully hear. Then came the city's offer. They wanted the land. Progress, they said. A new road, new development. We argued, said we needed more time, said there were complications. But money talks, and silence can't fight back. They forced our hand. We were told to section off the plots, dig them up, move the graves. All of them, even the ones in the last third. We broke the ground with machines that hadn't rolled that far in decades. We marked graves that had no names left. And we touched soil that hadn't been disturbed since before any of us were born. And that's when things started to change. That's when we woke something up. The first thing I noticed? The silence. Not the kind you expect in a cemetery. The respectful hush, the wind brushing the tops of trees, the distant hum of passing cars. This was something else. It was a silence that pressed in. A kind that felt like it had weight. As if sound itself had been pushed out. Like the air was tired of carrying noise. You'd speak, and your voice felt thinner. Radios wouldn't play. Footsteps didn't crunch right. Even the birds kept their distance. I brushed it off at first. Figured maybe the ground absorbed sound differently in that area. Different soil, denser trees. Something technical. Made enough sense to keep working. At least until the other things started happening. Tools would disappear. Not misplaced, vanished. One of the guys set a wrench down right next to his boot, turned to check the ledger, turned back, gone. We tore the area apart looking for it. Never found it. 2 days later, the same wrench turned up in the truck glove box. None of us put it there. Nobody admitted to touching it. It had dirt on the handle. The same reddish kind from that back corner of the cemetery. Radios were the next to go. 1 second they'd be crackling softly with the same classic rock station we always played. Then silence. Not static. Just off. Like someone had turned the volume all the way down or pulled the plug. Except nothing had changed. One guy, Darnell, slapped his radio hard enough to break the dial. We replaced the battery. Checked the antenna. Nothing. The second we left the last third and walked 50 feet away, full signal. Like nothing ever happened. Still, we laugh it off. It's what you do when things don't add up. You find a way to keep it light. It's easier that way. You crack a joke. You keep digging. You tell yourself the mind plays tricks when you're tired. When the sun is too hot and the job is too long. That's what we all said. Even when the spade flew. And I mean flew. Not tipped over. Not nudged. I watched it rise out of a dirt pile like someone had thrown it. It spun in the air once, landed 10 feet away, metal side down. It stuck into the earth like a knife. Nobody was standing close enough to touch it. No animals. No wind. We stared at it. Nobody spoke. Then Darnell laughed. I laughed too. Nervous laughs. Too sharp, too fast. And then we all just kept working. What else were we supposed to do? But later that night, alone in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it. The way it moved. The arc. The force. That wasn't fatigue. That wasn't someone being clumsy. Something had moved it. And the worst part? I think it wanted us to notice. As we worked deeper into that section, something changed. The coffins, they fell off. I remember it clearly. The shift. You'd hook the straps on the box, brace your back for the weight, and then nothing. Some lifted like they were full of air. One man staggered backward because he overestimated and nearly threw it onto the ground. It should have been impossible. These were old caskets, buried deep. They should have been heavy with time, with remains, with a slow weight of history pressing down. But some were featherlight. Unnaturally so. The first time we opened one, we expected something grim. Rot, bone, maybe a little collapse from moisture or age. What we found was nothing. Clean, polished wood, pristine lining. No sign of decay. Not a speck of dust. It was as though the coffin had been placed there yesterday and never filled. We told ourselves there had been a mix-up, a misrecorded burial. Maybe the grave had been marked wrong. People make mistakes, right? Records fade, stones get replaced. That's what we told the city. That's what we told each other. Until it kept happening. Second coffin, same thing. Then the third. And fourth. Over a dozen graves marked with names, with dates from the early 1900s. Sometimes older. Every single one was clean. Every single one was empty. Not disturbed, not robbed. Empty. That's when we checked the soil. Dug around carefully. Looked for signs of movement. You'd expect disruption, right? If someone had tampered with the graves. But the layers were intact. Completely undisturbed. The earth hadn't been touched in decades. We even brought in someone from the city to verify it. He left with a pale face and shaky hands. The only explanation left, the one none of us wanted to say out loud, was that the bodies were never there. That somehow, these graves were only pretending to be graves. Like placeholders. Like something had removed what should have been there without leaving a trace. That night, I didn't sleep much. When I did, it wasn't restful. I had dreams. Not the wild, running through the woods kind. No, these were quiet. Still. Cold. I saw the earth breathing. I heard the groan of wood shifting underground. And then the eyes, watching from beneath the soil. Just beyond the reach of my shovel. Open aware. Waiting. There was one moment. I don't know if I was asleep or half awake, but I felt something. Not on me. Under me. Like my mattress had a heartbeat. Slow. Steady. Like something pulsed through it. Through the floorboards, up from the dirt below the house. Like I was being listened to. The next morning, I checked under my bed. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe dirt. Maybe nothing. Maybe teeth. And still we kept going. Because it was our job. Because the city paid well. Because once you start digging, it's hard to stop. Even if what you're digging into was never meant to be touched. It was an accident that I found the box. Tucked behind a loose panel in the storage shed. Buried under crumbling ledgers and broken shovels. An old wooden chest. Locked but not well. The kind of thing someone hides because they want it found. Eventually, the lock gave way with one twist. Inside, paper. Dozens of pages. Yellow and cracking at the edges. All handwritten. My great-grandfather's name signed at the bottom of each one. He wrote like a man who needed to speak, but didn't trust his own mouth. Tight cursive. Sharp pressure on the ink. These weren't burial records. Not exactly. They were more like warnings. Observations. Confessions. One note stopped me cold. They don't stay. They walk until they're forgotten. I sat with that line longer than I care to admit. It sounded poetic at first. Then it didn't. There were older entries, going back to 1910. Scattered mentions of fog rolling in without cause. Sound carrying strangely through the trees. A child saying she saw a woman in white climbing out of the ground, and no one believing her until they dug up the grave and found it empty. One page described a priest who refused to bless a funeral in that section. He made it halfway through the rites, then froze mid-sentence. Didn't speak again for days. He left the church shortly after and never returned. Another report, dated 3 months later, told of a gravedigger who simply vanished. No note, no sign of struggle, just his boots left neatly by the tool shed. His name was scratched out in the payroll book. My great-grandfather added a single line beneath it. He went into the last third. I warned him not to. I don't know what drove him to keep these notes. Fear, maybe. Guilt. Or maybe just an overwhelming need to make sure someone someday would listen. Because the rest of the family didn't. My grandfather had read the notes too. His name was in the margins more than once. But he never spoke of them. The only thing he ever said about that land was this: "It doesn't want company." He tried to sell it once. I found the letter. A typed request of the city, formally offering back the section at no cost. The response came 2 weeks later. "Thanks for your concern," they wrote, "but the city is not interested in acquiring further cemetery land at this time." That was it. Cold. Final. My grandfather never mentioned it again. I don't think he was surprised. He knew, like I've come to know, that some pieces of land keep their own rules. You can pave over them, build gates and granite stones, give the trees pretty names, but none of it changes what's underneath. The records didn't explain everything. They didn't need to. They told just enough. Enough to make me realize we hadn't stumbled into anything new. We'd only picked up where the last poor soul left off. The mistake wasn't disturbing the graves. The mistake was thinking they'd ever stayed buried in the first place. I remember telling myself it would only take 5 more minutes. Just one last check before heading home. The others had already packed up. The sun was dipping low, and the shadows between the headstones had stretched long and thin, like they were reaching for something. I wasn't in a hurry. That was the problem. I should have been. The grave was ordinary. Nothing unusual about the marker. No name that stood out. Just one of many in the last third. I leaned over with my shovel, scraped at the edge of the plot, and then the air shifted. It didn't blow or gust. It changed. Thick. Cold. So cold I could feel it in my teeth. My breath stopped. I don't mean it fogged in front of me. I mean it stopped. Like something took it before I had the chance to use it. I stood frozen, knees locked. I couldn't lift the shovel, couldn't speak. I could hear the dirt crunching under my boots as if I were still moving, but I wasn't. I know I wasn't. Then the coffin creaked. Just that sound, would slow and strained. And it opened, all on its own. I didn't touch it. I braced for something awful. Bones, maybe, or worse. But inside, there was just a photo, sitting neatly, like it had been placed there gently. Face up. No dust. No signs of time at all. And the photo, God, the photo was of me. Same clothes. Same spot. Same shovel in hand. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I should have. My mind couldn't catch up to what I was seeing. The air hadn't warmed. I still couldn't move. But now I could hear. A voice. Right at my ear. Low. Close. Like someone standing too near your shoulder. It didn't speak words. It didn't need to. Whatever it was breathed into the side of my face. And I understood something without language. I had been seen. I never remembered running. I don't remember standing or blinking or pulling away. One moment I was there, and the next I was sitting outside the shed, dirt on my hands, photo in my pocket. I've turned it over 1,000 times since. Nothing on the back. Nothing to prove it was ever taken. But I know it was. And what scares me most, in the original photo, I was looking down, focused, holding the shovel, just like I'd been. But now, I'm looking straight ahead, eyes locked to the lens. No expression, no sign of when it changed. I've kept it in a drawer, buried under receipts and manuals, and anything else I don't care about. But sometimes when I open it, just for a second, I check to see if the pictures change again. It hasn't. Yet. We finished the job, but the last third, the oldest part of the cemetery, became something we never spoke of again. It was as if that section simply vanished from our memories. We acted like the graves there had never been disturbed, as if nothing had happened at all. Maybe that was easier than facing what we had uncovered. Maybe it was safer. I left the cemetery last year. I told myself it was because I needed a change, a fresh start. But some nights, it doesn't feel like I ever really left. I still find myself digging, the earth loose beneath my hands. In my dreams, the sound of soil scraping, the faint creak of coffin lids, the weight of something unseen pressing close. All of it follows me. The place never lets go. Then, not long ago, a stranger appeared at my door. Someone I didn't know. Someone who seemed to carry a quiet urgency. He asked if I had worked at Pinelon. I nodded, though I wanted to say nothing. Without another word, he handed me a photograph. I looked down, and there it was, a picture of me, lying in an open grave. Not standing, not digging, but lying still, like I belonged there. It's hard to explain what that did to me. It wasn't just the image. It was what it meant, what it suggested about where I might end up if I stayed, about what might be waiting for anyone who disturbed that place. If you're listening to this, please remember something important. Just because a grave looks full doesn't mean it really is. And if you ever come across a freshly dug grave where there shouldn't be one, don't go near it. Walk the other way. Because some things, once stirred, don't settle back into ground. They stay with you. I worked at a cemetery my family's owned for generations. We were moving graves, routine or so we thought. But when we reached the oldest part, the air changed. Tools vanished. Radios died. And then we found empty coffins. No bodies. Just polished wood and silence. That night, I dreamed of eyes watching me from beneath the dirt. And one day, alone, I saw a coffin lid creak open by itself. Inside was a photo of me, standing right there, holding a shovel. I didn't run. I couldn't. Something whispered to me, but no one was there. Years later, I quit, but sometimes I still dream I'm digging. And then a stranger gave me a picture. Me, lying in an open grave. If you ever see a freshly dug grave where there shouldn't be one, don't go near it. Want to hear the full story? Hit subscribe and stay tuned.